Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I already did the beginning of this video, but I want to do an introduction because I was walking around with my dogs and this just came to me. It had to do with my dogs. But why do people choose to be abused? Why do people follow somebody like Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or any number of things? Why do people follow people who mistreat them? Why do people seek out relationships with people who are going to mistreat them and abuse them, right? You see it over and over again. You see that there is somebody who is, they have somebody who really loves them. They have a woman or man who really loves them. And yet they can't love this person who's loving them. And they go out and choose somebody who's a challenge, who is abusive to them, who is, manipulating them and deceiving them and being mean to them. How many women, can't fall in love with a nice guy? I mean, this is both men and women. Men are attracted to women who manipulate them and who psychologically, torture them, and women attracted to men who abuse them and manipulate them, right? My older brother, who was a womanizer, once told me, advice that I don't agree with, but he said, Paulie, what you got to do is you hook the woman, you hook her, into liking you. You be nice to her, and then you be mean to her, right? You just, you're awful to her, and she's trying to change you, and she's hooked into you because you got her to fall in love with you, and now she's, you got her captive because she wants to be mistreated, right, deep down or whatever. And that's really effed up thing to say, but I understand why he said it, right? Like I'm not predisposed to manipulating people. Like I don't like it. Like it makes me feel uncomfortable, right? To purposely deceive people and psychologically hurt them in some way or take advantage of what I know about them. Like even at a young age, I felt like that's a real evil behavior. My brother, of course, he liked to play these games. And he talked about it. I remember his wife talking about it and his girlfriend talking about it, right? And he, was a womanizer. He had all these women, but I think he's dying alone, right? He's old and has nobody because of his, mistreatment of these women, right? And, never going to be satisfied because you're a game player. So you expect the women to be playing games with you, and there's no purity to it. There's no, there's just no anything that you can trust. When you're that kind of person, you can't trust anybody else, right? But, I have a master's degree in counseling, and I worked with teenage sex offenders and with kids who were, almost that. They were sexually reactive was the term. They were kids who were young kids who had been sexually abused and had abused other kids. And I worked with abuse. And my ex was somebody who claimed that she was physically and psychologically and sexually abused by her mom and dad. And so, I had that for so many years. And so I had it in my personal life. I had it, my professional life. And it's just something that I'm predisposed to understanding and seeing. I'm good at pattern recognition. And I've thought about this quite a bit over the years. And I have an understanding of a big part of this. So let's get to the dog part and work our way back. So I'm walking around with my dogs, and, I said this to my wife the other day. Lots of people say they have the greatest dog in the world. Lots of people think they have the best dog in the world. Not so many people think that about their kids, I mean, realistically, or their spouses, or their parents, or people. But lots of dog owners think they got the greatest dog in the world because dogs are naturally loving and affectionate towards people. I was walking with my dog Tulsi, and I remember when she first came to us as a puppy, and she was running outside between my kids' legs like she was this little tiny puppy, Papillon, and so excited, so enthusiastic just to be around people she had never even met. She just loved them, right? Loved us as a family from day one, right? They're just how puppies and dogs are. And there are people who mistreat dogs precisely because of that, because the dogs are loving to them, and they don't think they deserve to be loved like that. So they're like, you're a stupid dog. Why would you love a piece of crap like me, right? I mean, they don't have these conscious thoughts, but that's, it bothers them that the dog's so loving and affectionate to them, giving them unconditional love. Like, I'll go outside for 5 minutes, come back in, my dogs greet me like they haven't seen me in 10 years, right? And, this is the nature of a dog, and to be loving in this way and affectionate. And a lot of people just don't want that because deep down they don't think they deserve it. They think they have to be punished I mean, I've known this for years. They think that they have to be abused. They don't deserve to be loved, right? Some people take it a different direction, like Trump, who become narcissistic and, falsely talk about how great they are, but deep down they know that they're POS, right? Deep down they know that they suck. And there's just this, and it's not just from religion or, guilt and shame. It's not some, it comes from, I guess, past lives and some scars, which I talk about. I'm not going to talk about here, impressions and things like this. But, some of it just comes from the nature of our modern day society and people not really finding what their soul's path and not doing what they're supposed to do. And deep down, they don't, they're not dissatisfied with themselves. And so there's this sense that they don't deserve to be loved, a deep down, negative feeling about themselves. And most people have it. Like, it's amazing, how few people, again, I don't believe in self-love. I don't think that's even possible. I don't think someone can love themselves. But you can be on the right path and doing what God wants you to do, doing what your soul wants you to do, and you feel congruent with who you are as a person. And then, love is just naturally received, because love is something you need, and I get into that later on. I think in this video, I talk about love as an energy, so I'm not going to talk about it here. But it's something that everybody needs. And so, most people reject God's love and don't think they deserve God. They're afraid of facing God. They're, ashamed of who they are. And the good people, the spiritual people, more than other people, because they're more sensitive to it, and they expect more from themselves, right? So you have this situation, and I'll take the example of women, because men also in a different way. But women who crave love more than men consciously, like women are aware of needing to be loved, then why aren't women finding men who will love them? Why aren't the majority of women finding a man who is, not only capable of loving them, but is also going to treat them in a way that's respectful? And why aren't they like the nice guy? Why do women attracted to bad boys or the nice guys, right? And if a guy's too, affectionate, too nice, they'll put him in the friend zone and they'll lose all attraction to him. Like, why is that? Why is that a thing? That's so much a thing, and you either know it in your own life or you've seen it with other people. Men in the same way. And it's not just one person. They've learned their lesson. They had a nice guy and they had a bad boy. They chose the bad boy. And then they have a divorce, kids, where, horrible. They're victims. They talk about what a nightmare the guy was, but they would take him back in a second, whatever it might be. But then they go find another guy. And the guy turns out to be just like that. Because in the beginning of a relationship, people can be nice. There's a honeymoon period where people can restrain all of their evil or all their negative character qualities and just appear nice. Like, most people can do that for some prolonged period of time. People may be a little bit less so now because we're living in a time where the truth is more evident. It's just harder for people to hide stuff. But, people can, for the initial period of time, restrain some of their crazy, restrain some of their negative behaviors. And also, they're just really happy with the other person. There's plenty of love, there's plenty of affection, there's excitement. And so it's an easier time. But then as the pressures of married life and finances and kids and all these things start to envelop the people, the people in the relationship, their negative tendencies, which they've been suppressing or haven't yet come to the surface, they're buried within the person because of stress and difficult circumstances, come out, right? It's amazing what behaviors and characteristics people can exhibit, let's say, in a war or some, traumatic thing. And when, things can come out of them they didn't even know they had inside of them. Negative things that they'd suppressed, things they're ashamed of. And, if there's anything that I can say as a fact that I can't prove as a fact, but, people can, as far as I'm concerned, for me personally, I know this, is that people are really, you have a divine part of you, which is your soul. You have the best version of yourself where you're being the optimum spiritual, higher developed person that you can be. Like, you have a range of the best possible, purely soul reflected person that you can be, right? And then there's the ego at its worst. Your ego becoming a demon and just being its worst, hating God, hating yourself, hating everybody, just filled with rage and hate and anger. You have your lowest possible person that you could be. Criminal, murderous, just evil, seething with negativity, right? The worst possible version of yourself. And most people are terrified of that version, but they're terrified of the saintly version even more. And that's, the problem with the ego. People are more terrified of their own divinity, and they're more terrified of being, that person, becoming that, ultimate version of themselves. They're scared of God. Most people are terrified of facing God. That's why they have a religion that's in between them and God. It makes them comfortable, right? The third master of the Sajmark system said, Christians, they want the son because they don't want to face God. It's like you don't want to talk to your boss, so you talk to your boss's son, so your boss's son will go talk to the boss, right? It's easier to talk to the boss's son than the boss. The boss is more intimidating. And most people are terrified of facing God and seeing God, and they don't want God in their lives. And therefore, they're scared of love, and they're scared of, having something than having it taken away. They would rather have something that's, safe. I dated this girl. She was a nurse, and her mom was like 300-400 pounds. The girl said her mom was once beautiful, and her mom was really desperately in love with this guy, but he got drafted, went to Vietnam. So she married this guy's alcoholic, abusive father, and then got divorced from him and married a guy who was even worse. And this nurse, she said when she was like 20, I knew her when she was, we were in our middle 20s, and when she was like 23, 24, she went and found her father. She hadn't seen him basically her whole life. And he's like, hey, why didn't you ever come see me? Like he paid no child support. He made no effort. And he put it on her for not, as a little girl, figuring out where he lived and coming to see him, right? And so this is the kind of, situation she had. And her mom told her, never fall in love, never risk your heart, settle and choose some guy that's like, a scumbag. And that was her, advice, similar to my brother's advice, right? But that's how people think, right? They play it safe, something that they know, right? Rather than reach for something that, is scary and is going to take more of their capacity. They would rather settle and be less than and underachieve and all these things, right? And so deep down, lots of people just think they deserve the worst. And that's why they fall for something like Trump or any of these things, right? And they're scared of becoming what they need to become and, operating on a higher level. So they defer and just turn their decision-making process and their hopes onto somebody else because they can't do it. They can't reach up and, operate on a higher level. And they feel uncomfortable with love and being loved and affection and success and all these things, right? How many people you see become successful, and this is part of the cheapening of, how bad material success is as a goal because it's not a true goal. But they become successful or rich or whatever, successful, as Cardi B says. And they become, what people think is the goal, the American dream, and they can't wait to lose it and throw it away and sabotage and self-sabotage. I mean, people self-sabotage all the time. And so in that, when the truth comes out, which stings, when you have to face the truth, which is painful, and the real truth of our situation here and our system and all of it, it's really a nightmare. It's like a horror movie. I mean, a big part of it's that. And what people will do to keep the status quo of this demonic system going. And so people have trouble really facing what they are, their lower nature, and even more trouble facing their higher nature. And then they have, this desire just to not think for themselves, take the blue pill like that guy in the Matrix movie, the first one, who went and took the blue pill and went back into the Matrix because he, the real life was just too painful. And, people scared of, what's really out there for them. So they want to numb themselves, take self-medication, take prescription drugs for psychological issues like depression and never figure out, what's really going on with them. And so you have lots of low-functioning people that are getting stupider, that are weak and entitled and dependent on a system and terrified of, the collapse of the system that is upon all of us. And so when someone comes along and says they can make America great again, well, that's just all they need to hear, right? And so the cult of Trump is born. All right, so let's get into this stuff here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Remember the whole shadow banning thing and, all the things I say to do that need to be done to keep my channel going, the subscribe, the resubscribe, the notification, the secondary notification hitting the bell, the membership program that we have here, I don't know, recommending videos or putting them on social media, whatever, like Facebook or something. I don't know, all these things, right? Likes and comments and all those things. It's like the Horton Hears a Who, where you guys say, we're here, we're here. Like you're still interested in the channel. I guess I'm going to do a narrative somewhere in the beginning of this thing, but I want to get into this stuff first. So one of my viewers, not my viewers, one of my friends on Facebook, who I don't know is a viewer of mine, I don't know who the person is, posted this. So, there's no damage to the year, right? They got this picture of Trump. No damage to the year. We've seen it, I'm assuming this is a recent picture, but I showed you my own one that I got from a recent talk. There's something that he's going to do later on. He turns to the side, and I'll, maybe see if there's a close-up of it. But we know there was no damage because his own doctor said that he didn't need stitches. And so coming out with that giant bandage was performative. Let's say there was something hit him in the ear. Let's say this thing was real, which it's not. That there was no real damage or any real reason for him to wear that giant bandage. And for him to say he took a bullet for democracy, it's silly. Like he didn't take a bullet, and we don't know what happened here. We know what happened, but in terms of the damage to his ear, there was no reason for him to wear a bandage. He had stopped bleeding by the time he hit the stage. I showed you these various pictures. And so, it's just, by the time he hit when he walked off the stage, his blood was already dry. There's no blood on any of his clothing. So there's a lot of fakeness and WWE stuff going on, which I said in the beginning, and now it's come to fruition, right? And so there's no reason for him to be milking this thing, because this is his crucifixion moment. This is his persecution moment for being a, pseudo, or at least representing Christians, because he's already said he's not a Christian himself. So for the Trumpers who believe in patriotism and Christianity and these things, this is Trump being targeted and being victimized, but he's not a victim because nothing happened here, right? And, him being performative. Like, you got to admit this is performative because it is. He exaggerated his cut. Like there's nothing there. Like everyone was looking for, is there, like, where did the bullet hit exactly, right? Like there's nothing there. Okay, so I'm editing here, and I wanted to explain this. So the AR-15 style rifle takes a bullet called the 223. I'm not sure the rifle they're talking about here is an AR-15 style rifle, but I think it takes two kinds of ammo. The 223 is, in terms of its diameter, the line that goes across the circular, the circular length of the bullet is 2.224 inches, which is about 1/4 of an inch, right? Quarter of an inch. So it's very small, right? Quarter of an inch is not very big. Now, if Trump is really committed to this thing, he would have allowed them to take a little bit of piece of his ear, a quarter of an inch of his ear, in a circular, like, it doesn't even have to be like the whole bullet, like the whole bullet pass through, even just a little circular part of his ear, where they could have shown that, oh wow, that looks like a bullet, right? And I even suggested they could do that, right? They could do a surgery to take out enough of his ear. And the ear, he says how bad it bleeds, but people get these piercings that are much worse in more sensitive areas in the ear. They could, it would hurt for a short period of time, but it would be nothing, in terms of the greater scheme of things. And then he could have revealed this place where the bullet hit him, and it would look like a bullet just passed through. They could cut a little circular part of his ear out and just, based in the very small circumference and diameter of the bullet, right? Small bullet. But instead, he's got nothing, right? So his commitment's not even there. It doesn't matter because his dopes are always going to believe him. Almost nobody's calling BS on this. As my understanding, even truthers, their direction they're going is that it was a setup and they're trying to assassinate him, and all these things. There's a conspiracy. And so that's, the majority of truthers, I don't know how many truthers are even implying or saying something like I'm saying, which is ridiculous because it's so fake. And everyone's talking about like Trump is some tough guy, and I mean, the presidency is based in this thing. Like, this will gift him the presidency. And, I mean, it should, depend on what else happens. And just a little bit more commitment. Let him just, do a little surgery. Just take a little bit of the cartilage, a little bit of the ear on the side. It wouldn't be like, be almost nothing. And it would be like, oh my God, he really was shot. But he's such a puss. He would, and he doesn't have to. Like, he's not going to tamper with his body, right? He's old as F, so what difference does it make if you got a little. I mean, you'd have this war wound that everybody could see, and you could show it off and go, yeah, that's where I took the bullet for him. Coming out, I took a bullet for it, but you didn't take a bullet, right? And so I took a bullet for democracy, but he didn't even, allow them to, take a little bit of chunk of his ear, like a tiniest bit, and it'd be done under surgical conditions and, all of these things, and then they could show the wound, they could show where the bullet is, the day after or 2 days after, and there would be just this thing that was there, and you'd always have it and be proof for people. But he wouldn't even commit to that, like the smallest thing, the smallest sacrifice in his part, right? And he wouldn't even commit to that. And I bet they proposed it. I mean, instead now he's got a clean ear that shows no damage, and he's still milking this thing, which we'll get into in these video clips. And they're claiming that he's God's, God, divine providence, and he's God's messenger, and he's God's, soldier to come in, and he's the chosen one. All this BS that they're pushing out there, and he won't even like let him tamper with the little smallest amount of, like the least he could do in terms of losing just a little bit of skin on his ear and having just a little bit of a thing there. And he'd be able to, again, he'd brag about it all the time, point to it and things like this. But, I mean, when you get an ear pierced, I mean, people get bigger holes in their ears. I mean, think about the earlobe, which is a much more sensitive piece of ear than the top of your ear, right? And they get these, dramatic piercings like just ordinary people. And Trump can't even undergo something where they give him some, a local anesthetic and just clip a little piece of his ear and then show it off immediately, and he'd have this thing, but he can't do it. And it'd be almost impossible to debunk it because you could say, it was surgically. I mean, there's no way. The majority of people aren't going to, that's all they would need to see, right? But anyways, he can't even do that. So this is Tucker Carlson's interview with Ben Carson.
You do know Donald Trump very well.
I know him very well.
When did you meet and when did you decide you liked him?
The first time we met was at Mar-a-Lago.
Did he get you addicted to sedatives? Because, geez.
And this was maybe about 10 years ago. It was before either of us got into the political arena. And we were just enjoying each other's company. And someone says, Rod Stewart just came in. He said, I don't care. This is Ben Carson. I knew what kind of person he was at that point.
Was it the Rod Stewart, the singer, or just some guy named Rod Stewart? Because it might be different if it was really Rod Stewart.
And, my whole family was with me, my mother. And, it was a Easter program. And he just made sure that we were comfortable and that we were taking care of him, especially wanted to make sure my mother
So what kind of, he's a preacher, I guess, right? Dr. Ben Carson. And so why is he staying at Mar-a-Lago? Like, West Palm Beach is a really rich area. My family, my grandparents retired to Boca Raton, and my parents retired there. And, there's that whole area, Fort Lauderdale by Miami, and just a lot of money there. And West Palm Beach is one of the richer places, right, where the real millionaires and billionaires live. This guy's a religious guy, but, he's hobnobbing with Donald Trump, who's Satan, right?
Was comfortable. And there were all kinds of celebrities and important people walking around, and he was just trying to make sure that we were comfortable. And that's the kind of person he is. I noticed.
He's just a caring person. Tucker Carlson had said that he really dislikes Trump, but now he's gone full Trump. Look at him. Look how concerned he is.
The workers, the people who serve the meals, the people who park the cars. He knows those people. Yeah, he knows their names. He knows their families. The same thing at Trump Towers.
Just in case they screw him over so he can go after him. Because he's gone after his employees, right?
there. And he seems to be a genuinely caring person.
Come on, bro.
It didn't take long before he knew my family, knew their names. He's just that kind of person, as opposed to the very superficial politicians who are always playing to the
Okay, playing to the camera.
cameras.
You're not the guy who fakes an injury and pretends all these things. So, but then this was the money piece here.
There was so much insistence that I run after I gave the presidential keynote for the presidential prayer breakfast. And I had over 500,000 petitions in my office. There were people every place I went with signs, run, Ben, run. And,
Run, Ben, run for president.
And, I really didn't want to do it, but there was just so much pressure. I just said to the Lord, if you really want me to do this, you got to give me all the stuff a person who runs for president has. Or
Make a pulse.
a Rolodex with all the important names, a lot of money, an organization.
Please, God, give me a Rolodex and some money. I don't want to run for president, but if I am, you got to give it to me.
And I said, I don't have any of those things, nor do I intend to develop them. The next thing I knew, they were all there. And our organization was raising more money in a month than the RNC.
That's something Trump would say.
It was incredible. But during the campaign, we talked. And I told him that God chose him, that he was going to win. There were a whole bunch of us running. I said, you're going to win because God is going to use you to help save our country. And he did.
So, yeah, but he didn't save our country, right? Like, you see that now. Well, he doesn't because he won't. But Trump made it worse. It was 100% made worse by Trump. And everything that happened that you want to complain about in the Biden administration was a reaction to Trump, right? They used Trump as a weapon to push their agenda through, right? You got to see this. I mean, it's easy to see. Like, you're just in denial when you don't want to see something. That the agenda that got pushed through under Trump was the liberal agenda, the hyper-liberal agenda. And it's not even real liberalism. And all the things that have been generated based in the hatred of Trump that is totally deserved. Like people say Trump derangement syndrome. Trump does things all the time to provoke people, provoke rage in people. He says things and does things, and I like it. I like the way that Trump acted. I like the way he made the presidency into a joke, because it was already a joke, right? I was a fan of these behaviors, but they used those behaviors as a way to push their agenda through. All the stuff, all the immorality that came through this, it was based in a ramped up liberal rage that was against Trump. They got the people, on the left, enraged at Trump. And so everything that Trump has done that you guys think is so great, that provokes the left, they've used that as a weapon against you. And, I loved it until, the whole debacle and the way that he failed on COVID. He didn't prevent COVID. He didn't prevent those things, right? I mean, it was an operation. COVID was a global operation that, some biological weapon was put out there, one that was not going to kill you, but was going to, do all the things that it did because, it's all affected us in a negative way. I mean, for me, it was something, ultimately, for me, I've gotten better than I was before COVID. But who knows what the damage is and what, COVID does to all of us, right? Because it was a biological weapon. And he didn't stop any of that, right? Okay, so let me explain this again. Most people understand problem, reaction, solution when it's something to do with, say, Biden or the government, but not with something like Trump, right? So what they do is they create a problem, and then there's the reaction of the panic of the people. And when you're scared, you will accept things. You will give up your rights. And then there's a solution that they give, right? And so you're scared and you're vulnerable, and then they come up with a solution. So they made you feel unsafe, the people, and then they say, here's the solution. You have to, when you go to the airport now, we're going to frisk you, right? You're going to have to go through a naked body scanner because this thing happened in 2001, And I know you're all scared, but this is going to keep you safe. So, whenever they're saying we just want to keep you safe, and safe is a big word. Like safe, you hear them use the word over and over again as politicians. It'll be safe again, right? People want to be safe. And safe is people have a positive association with the word safe. But, applying this to Donald Trump, applying this to any of these people, there is what they say they're going to do. And then there's what they're going to do. And then there's going to be the outcome of what they're going to do. Or any situation is going to have an outcome, right? So Trump gets elected. And he tries to do some of the things he promised, some of the things he backs away from. But the right-wing people are happy. They have Trump there. They're satisfied. They think they can just relax, right? Because they got their guy. And so the left-wing people are outraged and freaked out. How can this be? People are threatening to leave the country if Trump gets elected again. Famous people, right? All these things. Ashamed of you as Trumpers for voting. You Trumpers that vote for him. I mean, very few Trumpers are listening to me anymore. But, all these Trumpers that they're ashamed of. And the Trumpers aren't any worse than the liberal voters. They're all sheeple and they're all, automatons and just incapable of critical thinking skills, at least in this area. And so the left is completely, they're activated, where the right is pacified. So whenever you win the presidency, you're just hoping that your guy, and this thing happened with Obama, right? So the left wing elects Obama. And he's like, this guy's into human rights, and this guy's he isn't going to be as bad on the wars. But what did he do? He did Libya. He started Syria. They did some stuff in Egypt. So he had 3 more wars, even though everyone thought that he was going to bring the end of the Iraq war and Afghanistan, and that he would be a liberal that would be into human rights. Plus, the guy was really hard on whistleblowers, right? And the right-wing people wanted wars, so they're all into it, the neocons, and Obama gave them all that. And so even though the liberals think that Obama's a liberal and he's going to give you the liberal agenda, he's promised you an Obama phone, they're all sitting there on their hands thinking, oh, Obama's got this. But Obama was screwing them over in terms of all the things that they believe in, especially the really liberal people who are anti-war, right? And so with Trump, it's the same thing. People are, thinking that Trump is going to handle all this, and he wasn't. And the left is activated, and they're ready to go, and they go and they push through all this agenda and change. They change the way, I talk about this later in this video, but I want to explain what I meant by it, and meant by it here. So it's the outcome. What happened with Trump? And so Trump is going to tell you how great it was when he was president. He'll brag about the policies he pushed and all the accomplishments, but a lot of those things weren't accomplishments, and they're not on your side. And you think they're on your side because you listen to right-wing truthers and Alex Jones and people who tell you how good these things are. But the economy got better, but that's because Trump deregulated everything that caused the 2008 economic collapse. So he deregulated the criminals, the bankers. He let the bankers do whatever they want. And you don't like the bankers, and no one does. And they started doing the same old derivatives bullshit they did before. But that can't, that's not sustainable because we know what happened before with the massive bailout in 2008. Instead of doing that, they did COVID, but it could have been anything, right? And so Trump then shut down the economy, did Operation Warp Speed, and he divided the country, caused censorship. And so if you look at the things that he actually, this is what this was the outcome of the Trump presidency. It certainly got worse for all of us, worse than it did for the liberals. The liberals got things that they've wanted for years, this pushing this, the gender stuff and the pronoun stuff and all these things, the cultural things, and then they got a Biden presidency. And you say, all right, well, Trump got rid of abortion. Yeah, I guess to some extent, but not really because it's still happening. Just, it's less likely in certain states, right? Are the abortion numbers down? And so, you got to look at things like that. What's the outcome, right? And the outcome of the Trump presidency was bad. He didn't make America great again because that was impossible. That was a false bullshit promise. He didn't do any of the things he said he was going to do. I mean, minimal, things on the border and some of these other things. And so, yeah, he might close down the border and do better on immigration than Biden, but he's going to give Israel a blank check, which we'll get into, and all these, other things that he's going to do. And so it's not what they say is going to happen, right? Joe Biden is campaigning on the economy. And most people are freaked out by the economy because they're suffering from inflation. You know, when you go to the store and you do anything else, everything's more expensive now because of the bailouts. And it's, you know, they're keeping the inflation artificially down because it should be way worse than it is. And so he's saying that all these Nobel laureate economists are saying how great the economy is, but that's not how you see it because you are, you know, aware of it. Even Democrats are aware of the price hikes. And he blames that on greedy corporate people taking advantage of what? And raising the prices. Well, it's not that at all, right? This is because him and Trump both did bailouts because you closed down the economy. And so, you know, what they say they accomplished, they say Joe Biden accomplished more legislation than 2 terms of any other president with 2 terms. They're talking about how great he was, how effective he was. But that's not the way you feel about it, right? And so it's the same thing with Trump. Just because you want to believe in Trump and you listen to him and you're like, oh, wow, he accomplished a lot. Yeah, if you listen to him, he's a braggadocious piece of shit, right? But he's not, you know, he's not a real guy. He's not an honest person. And things have gotten worse since Trump started being the focal point of America. Like Trump is the number 1 celebrity, the number 1 talked about person, the number 1 hated and loved person, right? He's got enthusiastic fans and enthusiastic haters. And there's been a Trump sort of, like America's been all about Trump the last 8 years, and it's gotten worse. And so that's what you got to look at, right? Like, what is the outcome? What's the real outcome? Not what he says, or not what the Republicans say, or not what you're scared about what the Bidens or what Kamala's going to do. It's none of those things. It's like, is America getting better? No. It's like more divided and then worse on every level. There's been a degradation in the past, 8 to 10 years, and a big part of that has to do with Trump.
How'd you foresee that?
Because I knew the kind of policies that he espoused and that those were the things that were needed to turn our country around. They were the same things that I was thinking about. The difference was he wanted to do it and I didn't. So that's why I endorsed him so quickly when I dropped out.
So you didn't have a vision, a guy didn't communicate with you. You're just like, oh, this guy has policies that I think will turn the country around. So he must be God's servant.
What did he say when you told him you believe God had chosen him to save the country? What was his response?
I don't remember his specific words, but he was kind of taken aback.
Yeah, because he's the devil. So this is the narrative that I said that he was rolling out there, where he was claiming divine providence, which is very, very dangerous, right? It's one thing to be a scumbag politician and bullshit the people. There's one thing to do all that. It's one thing to lie to your supporters and deceive them and be a flim-flam man. I mean, that's all bad. But when you become a false prophet, when you become somebody who's claiming to be divinely inspired and you don't have one spiritual bone in your body, you have no real connection and relationship to God, you're not trying to connect to God, you're a giant egotistical person, which I'll show you in just a bit, and you're about sucking the love off of the people that are your fans, there's no better way to be, idolized than to claim divinity, right? It's one thing to be a rock star. It's another thing to be an athlete. It's another thing to be, famous, whatever it is, politician. But if you're a saint, if you represent God, the level of worship that people will give to you, and Trump loves that shit, but I'll show you. He loves it. Like he's totally into it, right? And so now it's a thing. And now he's really pushing this divine providence. He's God's chosen candidate, divinity. And there's none there. Like there's no divinity. Only in the sense that God would be using him to destroy what's left of the country. But God could also use Kamala. So, either way, it doesn't matter, right? America is an aberration and has to be, it's going to be destroyed, right?
But since the emergence of Donald Trump, the blending of religion and politics has reached new heights. A new piece in The Atlantic, headlined, "Lord, Help Us Make America Great Again," takes a deep dive into the prayers given at the beginning of Trump rallies and analyzes why America's religious right is firmly behind Donald Trump. Joining us now, the author of that piece, staff writer at The Atlantic, McKay Coppins. McKay,
Lord help us make America great again. That's not how you pray. If you're praying like that, it's, I guess for some people that's the level that they're at. But, prayer should always be, God, let me accept what's best. God, let me see what your actual vision is. Not to put something on God like, God, you have to save America. Because how many people who are religious, when America gets destroyed, will flee their religion and blame God? And the people around them, their kids and things, will blame God and say, why didn't God save America? Because God isn't interested in saving America. God isn't interested in America. God is not part of America. America is independent of divinity. You have a relationship with God. Your government doesn't, right? Just like Joe Biden saying, save the soul of America. America doesn't have a soul. It's a government. It has a constitution. It has, laws. It has, a political system. It has, businesses, right? There's the country itself, the land, which is divine, right? It's created by divinity. The water, the land, the birds, nature, all of that stuff. And then there's the people on it that are connected to God and have God inside of them. But then there's these constructs that have nothing to do with divinity. Your government can never be divine. Your government can be evil, but it can be good, it can be evil, but it can't be divine, right? It can be divinely inspired. It can have a relationship if you cultivate that relationship, but we haven't cultivated that relationship. There's nothing in our Constitution, our country, and our government that's cultivated a relationship with the divinity within the people that inhabit it, right?
You've covered this so extensively throughout your career, and you write in this new piece, Trump supporters attribute America's fall from grace to a variety of national sins, old and new. Prayer bans in public schools, illegal immigration, pro-transgender policies, the purported rigging of a certain recent election. Whatever the specific...
All this stuff is the fault of Christianity. And I'll get into that. I'll explain that in a voiceover. We get through this stuff.
The picture of America they paint is almost universally, biblically bleak. The premise of all of these prayers is that America's covenant can be reestablished and its special place in God's kingdom restored if the nation repents and turns back to Him. Ryan Burge, a Baptist minister and political scientist, told me that these ideas have long percolated on the religious right. What's new is how many Christians now seem convinced that God has anointed a specific leader who, like those prophets of old, is prepared to defeat the forces of evil and redeem
His name is Donald J. Trump.
The country. And that leader is running for president. So, McKay, that's an excerpt from your piece. It remains.
Okay, so we get the idea of these guys. So I have a variety of Trump clips to get through here. And he gave a long talk in Minnesota. And there's some excerpts here that will... let me show you these excerpts, and then I'll explain why Christianity is responsible for the moral decline in America. And it isn't people would think it's the sinners, but the sinners are sinners, right? Devil worshippers are devil worshippers. But let me get into this thing first here.
I told you during the convention, I said, I don't want to talk about it. But one thing that was so amazing, the people that were sitting behind us, we had thousands, tens of thousands of people, but they're mostly here. The people behind us, when this incident took place, nobody ran. And crowd control people will tell you when there's a shot fired, and people know a shot. It's much different sound than fire.
So, this is all about the devotion. Trump has espoused that his relationship with his followers is somehow better than the relationship that other people have, and that his fans are better. And that's about him being something great. That other guys' fans would have ran at a gunshot, at a Biden rally or Kamala or even some Republican, anybody else but him. But his wouldn't. His people are the best people because they love him so much. He just loves this thing. It's a big deal for him, right? Like he just, he loves the adoration. And that becomes very dangerous when you start attributing divinity to that. And so, like, anybody who has any spiritual evolution, this is something you should know about. Everyone should understand the history of spirituality and the pitfalls. So someone has some, what we call some scars in the Sajmark system. You have some, predestined impressions from a previous life. Like you could be an alcoholic or you could be a spiritual person. You could be both, right? You could have some spiritual tendencies, but also have some tendencies towards addiction. But you were born with some tendencies towards divine worship. And you have an interest in God. And as a little kid, there's some part of you that wants to be a spiritual person, like wants to have a connection with God. And you formulate a connection with God. And then through that process, you want to help other people also get this connection with God, right? You volunteer for service. You say, I'm going to help people. God, I'm willing to help my brothers and sisters. You lead me and show me what you want me to do. And so God helps you, and you gain a following. People start recognizing you as a person that can help connect them with divinity and somebody with knowledge and, somebody who's living the right way, like, in a lost world like this especially. People come and they, like I have some knowledge of this stuff, and people come to my channel to, and they gain, whatever, knowledge, information, energy, and things from this kind of stuff, right? And so there's a point where, and this has happened to so many saints and spiritual people, including Jesus. This is where Jesus had a spiritual fall. Like people don't want to acknowledge this, but it happened. This is what happened with his crucifixion, where the person starts feeling themselves a little bit. Their ego feels, the adoration of the crowd, and they stop serving God. They take their focus off of serving God, and they start serving their people. They start serving the people that follow them. And they get engaged with, they get engaged with their followers, like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, for example. But lots of saints. This is a very common issue, that people are attracted to you now because there's a glow that you have. There's an energy you have. You can find fake gurus that have some of this. They're not completely fake. They have some charisma. They have some divine energy on them. And their face relaxes, and people look at them, and they feel the divinity. They feel the energy, the particles of, devotion that are flowing off the people. And the people start worshiping them, and they start feeling God-like themselves. They start feeling themselves as, divine beings. And so they forget about God and their humility and their practice, and they start, serving the people. They feel the people's love. God is love. So they feel the love, the God coming from the people. And the people are pulling divinity out of them at first. And so when they serve the people, they rise up to a higher level, and where God can go through them, and they can be a conduit for the divine energy to flow through them. And so this loving energy is flowing through them to the people. Love is the fundamental building block of all creation. It's like, you need to breathe, but, like I've said this before, that you can go 30, 40 days, whatever it is, without food. A long time. It's really, you can go a long time without food. But you can only go 3, 4, 5 days without water. You can only go 10 minutes without oxygen, right? And you can't go a second. You can't go any time at all without love. Love has to be in your system. It's a divine energy. And so, food is the grossest. Food is food is grosser than water, right? Water is purer than food, and oxygen is purer than water. And so the more subtle something is, the less time you can go without it. And divine love is the most subtle thing. And so you can't survive a second without divine love. Love is the fundamental building block of all of creation and you as a person. And so you need to be nurtured with a love, like divine love has to nurture your system. And, people don't know how to access love. And that's why there's so many bad relationships, because, people end up being desperate. They become completely like a drug addict who, is addicted to something and needs it. It's like somebody starving to death, somebody who's, held under the water and can't breathe. And you're gasping, you become desperate, seeking to pull yourself free and get a breath of air, right? Like if you've ever been underwater, like when I was a little kid, I would get I'd be knocked around by a wave, and I would have trouble getting up to the surface and be, really needing to take a breath, right? So you break through the surface and you take this big, giant breath. So people get desperate, and people whose love bank is depleted, they need to get love from something or somebody. And so most people are trying to suck love off of other people because they're completely bankrupt and out of love. Very few people have love to give. And so they don't know how to connect with divinity because of our religion, and I'll cover that in a bit when I get to the end of this, these clips. And so the religion is blocking people's ability to connect to divine love, which is the ultimate source, right? And so when somebody comes along who has got this, like what seems to be an infinite supply of love to give, and people are so desperate for that feeling, and I've experienced this, on a spiritual level, the material level, doing the Sajmarg meditation, where there's this transmission that's given, and then the master of the system who radiates this energy. And so especially now you have all these love-deprived people. And so they can get love in a kind of a, I don't want to say perverted, but, unpure form in materialism. Like you can feel love in things like shopping, a small amount. Or you can get love from social media with people giving you thumbs up or approval. Or you can get it from a crowd of people. And so a saint is giving love to the people, and then the people return the love to the saint. And then the saint forgets their primary love source, which is God. They stop getting their love from God, and they feed off the crowd, and the crowd feeds off of them. But it is a horizontal relationship, and it's always doomed. That's why marriages that don't have a divine connection, where someone's getting the love from the source, right, or both people, and has love to give, right, then there's, this divine connection, right? There's lack of this divine connection. And so there's there's just so much love, and it gets depleted. Like you have a limited supply of this energy that everybody needs and needs to, to have to nurture their system. And so the person starts turning their attention away from God and to the crowd. And Donald Trump, who's never been a spiritual person, that's what he's doing. He's feeding off his crowds, and I'll show you him, an example of this in another clip coming. And so you have this, it's like the love then just gets depleted. And the crowd then starts, maybe they're pulled up a little bit by the divine love. You see this at concerts, or you see it, Madonna made a comment about this, that she needed to be fed by the crowd, right? People who are really bankrupt need this overwhelming amount of energy, and just to get a little bit of love out of it, right? A little bit of God out of it. And so because it's an unpure form, it's egotistical, and it's, not in its pristine form, right? But this is what happens in cults, because usually, like that guy, David Koresh, he had something. He was a spiritual person. He had some spiritual abilities, but, he was also kind of depraved egotistically. He started to bang all the women. He was impregnating all the women, wouldn't allow the other men. He was sleeping with other men's wives that he married, and then they would have to raise his kids because he was the only one who could perform sexually, right? So this kind of stuff. And all these things, right, where the person starts letting their ego and their desires and they let it get to their head. And it happens all the time to spiritual people. It's why, when I broke free from the heartfulness cult and started doing this gratefulness meditation, people started calling me master, and I'm like, I'm not a master, and this is not, I'm not getting, I'm completely separate from this thing, right? Because I don't need it. I don't need love from a crowd because I do this meditation, right? I don't need to be built up by other people. I don't need it. It's nice, it's good to know that your work has value, but it's not a necessity, because if you're connected to God, you have all the love because God's love is infinite, right? And you just have to keep on remembering that. Don't take your eyes off of the real purpose of your existence and the real source of this divine energy, right? So let's get back into it here.
Firecrackers and everything else, much different. They know, especially the people that we're talking about from that section, they know a shot better than anybody.
Better than anybody? They all know it. Just the people behind you are the experts on what gunfire sounds like. Why would he bring up firecrackers, right? Because, people will say they heard stuff even though they didn't. Not just because they're lying, just because everyone else is saying the thing, right? We know that from the big event in 2001. And so the big problem with him doing this, he's now calling attention to an anomaly. That if there was all this gunfire, why didn't people just run in panic? Not because they loved him, not that because they were so concerned about him. He said they saw blood and they saw him go down. They all worried about him, so they forgot about their own safety. Why did some people go down and other people didn't? Why did some people stand up? Why did people pop back up? And so you would think that people would say, well, that's odd. Maybe there were no gunshots. I'm not saying, like based in what he's saying, like he's bringing suspicion on something, but people are too stupid and too, the people that would usually ask this question are too indoctrinated with the Trump, derangement syndrome theory and all these things and the hatred towards Trump, that they're saying, well, why would, they've been trying to go after this guy for years. Well, have they? They never got him? Why did they never get him? They could kill anybody and they can put anybody in jail anytime they want. Trump isn't protected. He's not protected by God. He's one of their assets, right? I say this. They love him. They talk about him all the time. And so, he's the one who's bringing up fireworks, like firecrackers, right? So we don't even know what was heard or not heard by these people. We're just watching what we're seeing and we're hearing on, in television. So there might not have even been anything that would make these people gunshots. They maybe didn't hear those things, right? He's the one bringing attention to this.
A shot was heard, and then another, then another, then another. They saw I was in trouble. I went down, but I grabbed, I looked, I said, wow.
Again, do you not watch the videos that we've all seen? There was zero blood on your hand, MNFer. There was never any blood in your hand. We saw the video. Like, there was no blood on your hand, no blood on your coat. There was just a little bit of ketchup sprayed on your ear.
But a shot was fired, and when you look at that tape, nobody ran. They saw I was in trouble. This is the most incredible movement. These are the most incredible people.
Why? Because they all were putting themselves in harm's way for a flim-flam man? That they were all willing to take gunshot fires, but all they can consider is you? That's what he's saying here. That these people put themselves in a situation where they could get shot because they love this guy so much, this piece of shit, right? Like this, this flim-flam man, demonic, the billionaire piece of crap, selfish, narcissistic liar, that they're all putting themselves in harm's way. Like what spiritual leader or what leader would say that, right? It's a stampede out of the stadium isn't good, but for them to be like, he's proud of these people for standing up as gunfire is hail, bullets are being, shot over their heads, right? There's a hail of bullets coming down from this building, according to the official story. And that all these people who are standing up and looking for the shooter, and he's going to talk about this guy, I'm sure, right here.
They saw, they were right here.
Fight, 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 fight. This woman has a sparkly MAGA jacket on. Fight, 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 fight. Fight, fight, you can tell us.
And it was a group similar to this, a little bit larger, twice the size. And those people, and there was one guy, I got to meet him. He was dressed in black. He had sort of a green.
This is the guy I'm talking about. Of course, you bring this guy up.
Floppy hat on. Not only didn't he run, and there were others that did this too. He stood up. Bullets are going. He's just looking. Did you see it? Does everyone? You've seen this clip hundreds of times. People call up. They see it hundreds. But look at that guy. He's not afraid. And then he's pointing. There he is. And the Secret Service sniper with one bullet, he did a...
So, this guy is their leader, right? This is the God's chosen person that is claiming divine providence from this fake event. He hits the ground, right? The story is he felt something in his ear. He hits the ground. And bullets are flying, and there are a lot of people who aren't protecting themselves. I mean, get down low, get as low as you possibly can. You know, I mean, and like he's saying this guy, you know, the leader is supposed to be doing what you wouldn't, right? The leader's supposed to be taking bullets for you, not the other way around. You know, the leader's supposed to be serving you in this kind of context, right? And like he's hiding and cowering, and you know, and I'm not, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. Hit the ground. There's no sense in, I mean, some bullets are flying, then you're supposed to get out of their way. Like, you know, like that's just being, you know, what you're supposed to do. Like this is, you don't just stand there and allow the bullets to hit you. It's stupid. And he's saying that the love that they had for him, the concern that this crowd had, you know, that they're somehow better than him because he's sitting there thinking about himself and not wanting to be shot. And they're out there, you know, and this is cult behavior, right? Like he's proud of his cult. Like he says this every time. This is his biggest takeaway from this event was that people were willing to put themselves in harm's way because they were worried about him. Like think about the narcissism here. Like this is the opposite of a spiritual person.
A great job. It would be nice if it would have been earlier.
So it would have been nice if it was been earlier. Then you wouldn't be able to do what you did. You know, like of course it could have been earlier because the guy was up there with a gun on a roof, and they had the guy in their sights for like at least 8 to 10 minutes, according to the official story.
A much further distance. And let me tell you, the Secret Service is taking a lot of heat, but I was under fire, and I was down, and I was here, and they came rushing, and there were bullets coming at us because it was whizzing over my head, and they
were whizzing over your head.
I don't know how they didn't get hit, but they had 7 or 8 guys that absolutely, you talk about bravery, they jumped on top of me, they shielded my body.
It was before it was 6 guys, now it's 7 or 8. It was 4 guys and 2 dudes and 2 girls.
I mean, to a point that was amazing. And we have to remember that too. We have to remember. They understand they made some mistakes, but I'll tell you what, bravery was incredible because those bullets were flying. They were flying nasty, and it didn't stop them. You saw how fast they moved. They just moved and they jumped on me. I could show you an arm here. I said, these are strong people.
But, you could show it to you. Is there an actual bruise there? Like show them your ear.
But I'll tell you, they were very brave people. That was a very incredible thing. And fortunately, maybe it could have been a little bit earlier, but that sniper for Secret Service, he was a world-class shooter. And from probably 400 yards, that's 4 football fields, because he was over there.
No, not 4 football fields. They said it was a shorter shot for him than it was for the guy.
Quite a bit away.
He was actually right behind him. I showed you the video. We have the video clip. You know, I mean, they've done a mock-up. The guy was over here on a roof. He was 130 yards from the shooter, and the shooter was 150 yards from Trump. But, like, again, it's always something, you know, he exaggerates. I mean, this is not based on any factual information that the rest of us already know about.
This guy was over here 130 yards away.
He was 150 yards away from you.
You add it up and you double it or triple it. And
is that the Common Core math that you're supposed to be against?
One shot, boom. Because if that didn't happen, a lot of people would be gone.
Woo! He shot him. Woo! He killed that MFFer. We love God. Woo! God is great.
But there was great bravery displayed, and you have to hear that also. You have to hear that. There was no like, oh, let me get out of here. I want to resign immediately from Secret Service. No, there was incredible. Every one of them. There wasn't one that was slow. A woman who was on my right, she was shielding me, beautiful person. She was shielding me everything she could. And she got criticized by the fake news because she wasn't tall enough. Well, you know, she wasn't tall enough because I'm tall and she wasn't tall enough. And she was criticized. She was so brave. She was shielding me with everything. She wanted to take a bullet because the bullets were flying.
Woo! She really wants people to take bullets for him, I guess.
Woo! Incredible. And every one of those guys But the amazing thing is the people behind me, and you didn't see this because you don't see it, but we had a field as far as the eye could see, much more than what we have here. If you added everything up, it would probably be like that. But even more than that, we had a field as far as the eye could see. Nobody ran.
Nobody ran.
And the crowd experts say when there's a shot fired, like in a soccer stadium, the whole place, they call it a stampede. They run.
They call it a stampede.
Gates. Nobody ran because they saw I was in trouble. And it's an amazing thing. I'm telling you, this is a movement the likes of which nobody has ever seen before.
So this better than Jesus? They love you more than Jesus? I mean, look what they did to Jesus, right? Jesus was a real spiritual person that did divine service for his disciples. One of them betrayed him. One of them was Judas, betrayed him. Peter denied him, and Thomas doubted him. And then all the people that turned on him when he was crucified. I mean, that's what happens. And so you're saying that this love that they have for you and their devotion and this crowd, this is like some divine movement. Listen to this effort. Look at how, I mean, this is like he's gone south. So there's more about that, right? But let's get into his, this is about crowds.
Stairs, 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 stairs. 2 stairs. Get so many stairs. Get so many stairs. It's like too many stairs. I don't know what the hell they need them for. But they spend a lot of money. Government often will spend. Government has many more stairs than private. We put up like 1 stair. They put up like 12. But you always have a lot of stairs, so I'm imitating them, and I'm being funny, and I think I'm being so funny. And I had a tremendous crowd. We had 42,000 people, and I'm saying to the people, when Biden gets off, do you ever notice? First of all, he doesn't make long speeches like that. Second of all, even though he can't read a teleprompter, he never goes off the teleprompter. It's a mess. It's a mess. And I was telling the people, I said, do you ever watch when he's finished with his 2-minute speech? It never lasts more than 2, maybe 3 minutes. 3 is like a long speech. He goes, and he'll point at a stair. And then he'll walk.
Woo! He's mocking a senile dude, woo!
He'll point right at the stair, and then he won't be able to find the stair. This is what we have negotiating nuclear weapons with Putin, with Kim Jong-un, with President Xi of China. No.
Okay, so why did the Republicans in the House, the Republicans own the House, and they have the Senate, why aren't they going after Biden so he isn't president anymore? Why don't they invoke the 25th Amendment or whatever it is, right? One of those effing amendments. Why don't they do that? Because the Republicans can do that. They could have done this all along. But you wanted to run against him, and now you don't want Kamala to be sitting president as you run against her. I don't know. Like, they should, politically they should do that. They should try to get rid of Joe Biden because it's the right thing to do. The guy has Parkinson's. And they've sat around, everyone knows it in D.C., knows that he has cognitive decline, and they haven't done it. Republicans haven't, right? Because they want the guy out there. They hope he campaigns for her so that they can continue to tie her to him and his senility.
Oh, this isn't going to work out. Bad things are going to happen. But I called my wife. I said, who else could do it? Who else could do it? I had 50,000 people. How great was my speech? How did I look? How great was I? It's on speech. I said...
See, listen to narcissism. And his crowd size, it means so much to him. Like he counts the numbers.
First Lady, how great did I look? She said, there was something wrong with your hair tonight. It looked terrible.
There's the air. You can see no damage.
She said, you were okay, but, I have 50,000 people. Elvis didn't have 50, and he had a guitar. I had no guitar. I didn't have the use, right?
Elvis didn't have... He's comparing himself to Elvis. Like, he's more of a star than Elvis. Like, this is so important to him, right? Like, he brags about the size of his crowds because this is, being a billionaire, being successful, having the adoration of these dopes, these sheeple out here who buy into Trump's stuff, and now being like someone of divinity, a divinely chosen person, the chosen one.
Elvis had a guitar. He had a lot. We love Elvis, right? But he had a guitar. I don't have a guitar. So we'd have like 50, 60, 70. You know, we had 107,000 people in New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. Wildwood, New Jersey was beautiful. We had 25,000 people in the South Bronx.
He just goes on about the size of his crowds here. So when the Cubies came out, and they came out with these goofy narratives about the deep state, and that there's these special people out there, and Trump was one of them, and John Kennedy, JFK, or whatever it was, these with the Kennedy guy, not RFK, but the other one. And they were all here to take down the deep state. And Trump liked the narrative but denied the Cubies at first. But this, narrative that he's this chosen one, and he started to feed into it even though he originally didn't know what they were talking about. Because he, like he had been prepared. There's some good guys in the government, and they had these people, and he was their champion, and they were using Trump to take down the deep state. And now the evangelicals, are looking at Trump as being some kind of reincarnation of Jesus to take down the demonic nature of the liberal agenda, right? And it's just a lie. Like, he knows that it isn't true, but he loves them believing that about him. Like, he's starting to believe it himself, right?
And it was like a love fest. It was like a love fest. 25,000 people.
You mean them loving you, right? Them loving you. You frickin' vampirish, ghoulish MNF up there, taking in as much love he can from these people that he's lying to and mistreating and conning. And, again, Ben Carson said that he was there to save America. He didn't save America. He made America worse. Like, America's worse off now. And Biden presidency is a part of Trump's presidency, because Trump has been the dominant figure now for 8 years. And so the last 8 years, the country has been focused on this MNFer, and we've gone down a deep, dark slope of depravity. And he's been the central figure, right? We were living in the country of Trump right now for the past 8 years.
And I said to the First Lady, how great was I tonight? I didn't like your hair. I didn't like that. I said, who the hell else can get 52, 58, 79? We had 79,000 people in South Carolina. Who can get it, First Lady? And she didn't care about that. Then
You can get it, First Lady? She has a name. You call her First Lady? You call Melania Trump First Lady.
I called her finally. I called her she said, you were great tonight. Oh, I said, that's great. Thank you very much. And I said, how else? I mean, was it really good? Yeah, but there was a problem. Why couldn't you find your way off the stage? They said you couldn't find. So these people, I was playing and having fun, imitating Joe Biden not being able to find the stairs. And they said that Trump couldn't find the stairs off the stage.
Boo, look at this guy. Put his thumbs down. Boo, the mainstream media. Boo, mainstream media. Boo, 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 mainstream
so I
media.
have to be very careful. Tonight,
Look, this guy just gave the fingers. This dude just did the fingers here. This is, watch this kid right here.
Trump couldn't find the stairs off the stage. So I have to be very careful.
He gave the double finger.
Tonight I'll have a very bad night because I haven't done that little routine in a long time because of that. You were good, but it looked really bad at the end, darling. You couldn't find the stairs. What's wrong with you? Nah, I can find the stairs. I'll let you know when it's my time not to find the stairs. I'm going to know. No,
you don't know. That's the thing about it, because your brain doesn't work. Okay, so he loves the crowds. He talks about the crowds all the time, how his crowds are bigger, how he's got real love and enthusiasm. It's a love fest. These people are willing to take bullets for him. This is your guy, right? This is your narcissist. This is the people, thinking that this guy is some saint and some divine person here to rescue them. And he's feeding into that shit. And he never was ever concerned about anybody else but himself. So here is an extended version of him talking about the shooting. And he says something here. I forget what it is, but I Anyways,
I want to thank you very much, Front Row Joes. These guys, they've come to over 200 rallies. They were
they really love you.
a rough one 2 weeks ago. I know I saw him sitting up front with a whole group of a lot of Front Row Joes, right? That was a nasty one. That was one. We lost a great person, Corey, firefighter, great man, and 2 people really badly hurt, but they're okay. They're getting better. And I saw the whole group. They had like 40 of them, Front Row Joes.
40 of those Front Row Joes.
And I don't know where they get the money. They must be rich as hell, but they follow us all over the place.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't they have jobs and lives and wives and families and things?
And we love you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, the amazing thing about that night, and I don't talk about it, I told you during the convention, I said I'll never...
Okay, so let's go past this part here, which we already saw. So let's resume from here.
The whole place, they call it a stampede. They run for the gates. Nobody ran because they saw I was in trouble. And it's an amazing thing. I'm telling you, this is a movement the likes of which nobody has ever seen before. And I feel the same way about them.
I feel the same way about them, except I'm not willing to take a bullet for you guys.
Right?
Or give you money, or or come to your events, or any of those things.
Thank you.
But I'll sit here and let you guys worship me like that. That's my role, and I
Those people are great. I just want them to know that they're all sort of famous now, you know. But it's not. You don't see one person running off that platform. The women, a couple of them ducked, but they got up. They got up. Everyone. There's not one person that ran. And
you mean they didn't hit the floor and have people pile on top of them? You were so much more valuable than they are, right? So there's a great story, like whatever it is, of a young Indian guy that goes to a guru. It's not the one I usually tell, so don't fast forward. It's a different one. And he goes to a guru in India and says, "Sir, I'd like to become your disciple." And the guru says, "Well, these are going to be your duties. You have to wake up 2 hours before me and get my breakfast ready, make sure my clothes are prepared, and then after you help me, after you feed me, you have to help me get dressed, and then you have to go and, do all this other work for me, whatever it is, right? A bunch of things. And, when I get tired, you have to rub my shoulders. And, so he goes through this list of all this free labor this guy is going to be doing as his disciple. And the wannabe disciple says, "Oh, well, please accept me as your guru," right? Because he wanted the guru position because it seemed to be a lot better than the disciple position, right? And that's Trump here. Like Trump, loves that these people worship him, and he's just digging it, but he would never do any of this stuff for them, right? Or anybody else, right? He would never be a good disciple. He would never be a good supporter. He gives people money for access, and he expects something from it. But he's not a service person, a person who would look up to other people and, put them on a pedestal, right? But he loves it. Like he's digging how, as much they love him, but he's, not willing to do that for somebody else. And, looking up to somebody else that's higher than you and aspiring to be like them, like being a real religious person, looking up to God. Like Trump isn't someone who would bow before God or a godly person, right? Because he's, he wants to be that himself. He wants to be seen as some kind of, a demigod, some, fake imaginary God that's not, really that. Just in terms of, a con man who convinces everybody that he's the chosen one.
some of these guys and some of the women, they stood up in the face of all that noise and all that scary stuff, and with all the blood that they were witnessing, they stood up and
Wait, what do you mean all the blood that they were witnessing? That little bit of ketchup on your ear?
they were looking right, because they wanted to help Secret Service and they wanted to help the police. They wanted to find out who that guy was. So I just thank that whole crowd, but those people behind me and the people in front were the exact same thing. You just didn't get to see them.
So I'm looking for, he's talking about not changing after the shooting. which is he's changed that tune, right? Like he said he changed and he didn't, which is important. I want to get to that, but he says this here.
Before they're burning our American flag. And I said, I know they say it's unconstitutional. Well, make it not unconstitutional. You burn our American flag, you should get immediately mandatory 1 year in jail.
Woo! See, this is the danger of this shit, right? Because the American flag doesn't mean anything. It's a symbol. It's not even a good symbol. Flags are, people die for flags, and, flags have nothing to do with God or, America is whatever it is, right? There's great things about America, bad things, but it's just a country. It's really a government. And, America, if it's good for you, yeah, you're happy. If it's bad for you, you're angry, whatever. But there is constitutional rights and censorship. And Donald Trump was deplatformed and whined like a little bitch about it and, all the things that he did. And then he caused us all to have problems with censorship. All these Trumpers, all these Cubies, all these morons, posting, all this untrue stuff and being douchey and stupid and being unreasonable hurt all of us in terms of truth seekers, right? Because they were posting lies, and this guy's a liar, and they're the liars, and they're all deceived and all these things. But he wants to put somebody in jail for free expression. But when a woman, which I covered in the last video, is violating, is doing something that the cops have said you can't do, breaking the law and harassing a abortion clinic because she's a pro-life person. And again, I believe abortion's murder, but she's doing something illegal. And she gets arrested and put in jails, and he's going to pardon her. And she gets, 2 years in prison because they're going after people, which I don't endorse, right? And Joe Biden censoring us all, right, doing things to censor us. And he's pushing for the same thing, right? Again, burning the American flag is not some big deal. People express their anger towards America. America isn't great. America isn't divine. America is whatever it is. There's good things and bad things about America. But this is a dangerous thing he's doing here.
Unbelievable.
And look at the crowd. They want blood.
Go for it. To do it.
So, like, if you burn the flag, you should get a mandatory 1 year in jail. Like, come on. And I'm not for burning the flag. Like, it's stupid. Like, but, like, you can't do that, right? You can't start imprisoning people. This is what they say about dictatorship, right?
On day one of the Trump presidency, I will restore the travel ban, suspend refugee admissions.
Okay, so I've got to go back and look for this thing here. So I ended up finding it. It's like an hour and a half talk, and I had to go through like the whole talk to find I didn't listen to the whole talk. I went through at 15-second increments. Right, it's still tedious, but I found it was at the beginning of the video. I missed it the first time I looked through. But you see, here's a blown up picture of Trump. His ear is fine, and I just want to expand on what I was saying here. I'm in the editing process about what I was just saying about Trump and the flag and the mandatory year and the people agreeing to it. This happened with the stupid Cubies. So the stupid Cubies, there's due process, your legal rights. And so the Miranda right, where they tell you anything you say can and will be used against you, so that you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. You have a right to attorney, right? So they read you your rights, and you have to go through this due process, to be judged by a jury of your peers and all these things that are, so much better than when some rich and powerful person could not like somebody and just throw them into jail, which I know Trump would totally do because he's a douche. And the problem with the Cubies was, as a patriot, you would want to defend those rights. But they got so worked by the QB movement that they signed off on. They were pushing for these, renditions where people were taken, from their homes without being arrested, without any legal rights, and rendered to Guantanamo Bay, where they are going to face secret military tribunals because they posted a bunch of shit about them, like Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg and other people on the internet. And there was all these people that had been put into Guantanamo Bay. And they were rooting for that as patriots. And like, it's the opposite of being patriotic. You know, like, it's just really stupid. Because they were rooting for this when Trump was president. And if you had that, if you gave that up as soon as Joe Biden was president, then he could do that to you or any Trumper, right? So you don't do that because of any of these rules. You have to abide by the Constitution and the rule of law. Because even if somebody's really bad or there are things that you don't like or go against your beliefs, you can't have these ways of, these kind of people just making these arbitrary rules and punishing the people that don't agree with them in these things, right? Because when you give up rights, it always comes back to get you. Like, you think you're giving them up. Again, problem, reaction, solution. And so this is where Trump is dangerous, and his dumb-ass Trumpers are, they're the fuel in this, this dictatorship that Trump's pitching, and he ain't going to be the president forever. There'll be a Democratic president after Trump or whatever it is, and, or another Republican. And now that they have immunity, because the Supreme Court has given them that, it's already bad. Like, it's, the presidency has been gaining more and more power under Bush, where he did all these, he started to make these presidential acts, and he was going around Congress. And so there's supposed to be checks and balances, and Trump wants to get rid of all those, as do the Democrats. And then whoever gets the, presidency can go around the Constitution. Before you know it, like, all of the things that you thought were your rights have disappeared, and you're like, oh, what happened? Oh, what happened? Well, you got fooled by Trump, you dumbass, right? That's what happened. So I also want to talk about Israel, because there was supposedly a deal on the table, and Hamas fired these lip-dick rockets into Israel, and now Israel's back on the aggressive and going to kill more civilians, right? And Trump is green-lighting this as part of a holy war. And the evangelicals are all about it because they suck. And,
USA is going to be fully made in the USA, and Minnesota's got a big piece of it. Israel's got it, and today they had a problem where something happened, but they knocked down, 6 months ago, 300 missiles were knocked down. If they weren't knocked down, it would have been devastation. But out of 300, one got through a little bit, it limped through and fell down harmlessly to the ground. But it essentially knocked out all 300.
I didn't know he was going to say that, but I talked about, like, these limp-dick rockets that don't do anything, right? He used the same terms because he knows that this is not a real thing. That this Hamas is an Israeli asset.
We're going to have something that's even superior. And
so he's talking about the Iron Dome here. I want to go back earlier to where he's talking about Israel, but first let me find this other piece here. So here is the beginning of his speech. He talks about Israel here, and I want to talk about this more after I get through the savior Christian thing he's doing here.
Before we begin, I want to condemn the evil attack on Israel that took place earlier today. A missile launched by Hezbollah killed at least a dozen children, young children. And
you don't care about Palestinian children at all. Right.
They were playing, as you heard, on a soccer field in Israeli territory on the Golan Heights, a place that I recognized during my administration as under Israel's sovereignty. It was a big thing. They've been trying to get it done for 72 years. I got it done.
You mean when they stole that land from Palestinians? Is that what you're talking about?
In about 1 hour.
You're a real piece of shit, right?
The savage Hezbollah terrorists struck these children with an Iranian precision missile. Dozens more were wounded in the attack, and sadly, the death toll is probably going to go very substantially higher.
You mean 20,000 kids, like in Palestine?
Our hearts go out to the families of these innocent children. No parent should have to suffer the terrible loss of a child at the hands of terrorists or anybody else. Today's attack on Israel cannot be forgotten, and it will go down as another moment in history created by a weak and ineffective United States president and vice president. They wouldn't have done this if I were the president. They wouldn't have done it. And they did.
Yeah, why wouldn't they? They're under total siege, and they've killed 40,000 Palestinians. So if this was a real thing, they wouldn't have done it because Israel wouldn't have ordered them to do it, because you're going to allow Israel to go and take this land and reclaim what they think is the promised land, which Christians, even evangelical Christians, believe in. And this is a religious holy war that'll end up in World War III, because this guy is a piece of shit. Okay, so I finally found it. Was at the beginning here. And it's good I didn't find it because I found other stuff. But this is the last piece that I want to do a voiceover about. How Christianity is responsible for this and not the evil liberals, because of just the way these things work. And so, let me get to this here.
She's worse. She's worse than he is. I'll tell you right now. I want to be nice. They all say, "I think he's changed. I think he's changed since 2 weeks ago. Something affected him." No, I haven't changed. Maybe I've gotten worse, actually, because I get angry at the incompetence that I witness every single day, the way millions of people are pouring into our country.
So, the thing is that would have to change you, right? When you have a near-death experience, it would have to change you. It didn't change at all. He's totally unaffected by it in every possible way because it wasn't real. There was no real event. And the thing about these things is let me switch over to a voiceover here. Okay, so before that I do that, there's one more piece I want to show you, but I missed this. I'm in the editing process. They're cheering him, saying he's gotten worse. He didn't get better, he's got worse. Yay, he's gotten worse. Yay, woo. Let's see if there's anything more they're saying.
And that's the thing that must change, and it must change quickly. It's great to be back in this beautiful state with thousands of proud, hard work.
So that was that. So first of all, I want to get to the whole, why this is going in a demonic direction, because it's always the religious and spiritual people's fault or responsibility for that to happen when that happens. But the first thing is that you can tell this thing is fake because it's not being covered anymore. Trump is still talking about it, and he's made up a completely different story than what we saw in the video. Like there's blood on his hands, it didn't happen, and then all these other things. They talked about a stretcher and these things that happened in the crowd and all the ways that this thing was dysfunctional and all the stuff that he said. The distance of the shooter from all the things that we've seen before that were, that we know to be factually inaccurate just based on what we've seen in the story. And him talking about the blood and all these things that they're pushing. And the people know it's fake on some level because they're not really all that enthusiastic behind it. They say fight, fight, fight. And, there's that moment. There's people wearing that T-shirt. But, it's like a WWE people wearing a T-shirt of something that happened that was completely staged. We saw the same thing with Nancy Pelosi. That story died, right? Like they made up some BS, excuse of, they blamed it on Trumpers when it's clearly some guy was like the guy's ex-lover or husband or whatever. And then the story just disappeared. Like they didn't want to talk about it. The Democrats didn't want to talk about it. And, why would this thing disappear if Trump was actually, there was assassination attempt? I mean, the story is gone. Like there was something on the New York Post today that talked about that they had this guy on their radar for 90 minutes before the shooting, which you already knew about. But the details have changed and they erased the stuff, and before you know it, no one's talking about it. In the truth community. I mean, there's like an event like this in the past that was obviously fake would have gotten so much more energy. And, I don't know what's going on with other truthers, but most of them are believing this thing to be, faked in the sense that they assassinated Trump and it was a conspiracy of, Biden support, whatever it was, right? The government, the powers that be, right? Deep state. They think it's a deep state thing, and which is stupid and silly. Like the whole thing is ridiculous. And there's no energy in it anymore because these things that are fake, they play for a week or two and then they move on to something else. Kamala Harris now is Joe Biden is withdrawn and these things, and they've moved on. And then Trump is just out there lying. He said he didn't want to talk about it, but he keeps on talking about it. And the reality of the thing is there's no, wound on his ear. Everyone kind of probably knows it's fake and they won't admit it. right? And the powers that be can't say it's fake because the official story is already there, and they're not going to say the Secret Service and the media and everybody was in on it, right? And so, like, that's what would have to happen for it to be pulled off. So the whole thing's an absolute joke. So what I'm going to tell you, I don't know if anybody else will say this to you, but, it's something I am well aware of. And it's a two-part thing, right? The first part is I grew up when Christians canceled people. And Christians cancel people all the time. The Christian religion and the power of Christianity and, the FBI and, this guy Herbert Hoover, all these people that were Republican right-wing people, and they canceled people all the time. And they demonized people all the time. So much so that people weren't able to express what they believe or be who they were. Like the stuff with Trump saying about flag burning and things like this. And so the behaviors that the left is exhibiting, the right used to do. The Me Too movement, the canceling people that happens now because of the liberal media. And it's because there was needed to be a change. Because if religion is remedial, the Christian religion is basic, bare bones, 101 religion that has been hijacked and compromised. Jesus was, on the first rung of spirituality. Like he had success spiritually, and I mean, to his credit, I'm not taking anything away from what he accomplished because it's hard to be a spiritual person, but he was on the first rung of spirituality. But that first rung is so much higher than everyone else, especially during that period of time. And then his teachings and everything got hijacked, and they made up a bunch of bullshit to create the religion the way it is now, where you can only get to heaven through this one process, and there's one Son of God, and everyone else who is not doing Christianity is going to hell. So therefore, you can do anything to save them in terms of going out and proselytizing or conquering people and forcing your religion on them because you're saving them. Like torturing and abusing people, and the kind of behaviors that Christians exhibited. There's this TV show on Netflix called The Vikings. And of course, the Vikings were Druids, and Christianity got a hold of them. And, the things that Christians did to all the peoples of Europe, all the Druids, all the people who, who were practicing something that was just as valid, probably even more so, than Christianity as it is now. And of course, the Crusades and these things. But it's bullshit. Like, my mom recognized this. I tell this story a lot. We were in Canada, and there was these Native American peoples. And my mom said to me, and I wasn't aware of the whole, I was a religious person, right? I, went to prayer meetings with my mom when I was like, 12, 13 years old. And then when I was 14, I started smoking pot, right? I fell off a zip line, got a concussion. I started using drugs. Those things are kind of related, but it probably would have happened anyway. And I, stopped thinking or believing in God. Like I don't want to say I didn't believe in God, but I never thought about God. And I didn't, I was done with the Christian religion because my mom and my dad got caught lying to me, and I saw all these people. We used to have nuns and people over the house. We were Catholic, and my mom had this charismatic prayer meetings. And these people were all gossiping. I went to these retreats with my mom and dad. My dad was not a religious person, but he had nothing better to do. So he would go. And these people were horrible, and I talked to their kids, and, they weren't good people, right? The parents, and, and I saw this. And of course, I didn't even know about the priests being pedos and all that, but, I saw the hypocrisy, and and then the other thing was the way that drug users were talked about, like a pothead was like, and I thought everybody who used drugs was evil. And then when I started hanging out with friends who smoked pot, and I'm like, they're not evil. Like, so, I've been lied to so much, and that's the problem. That's one of the reasons morality has decayed, because Christianity is based in lies, the religion itself. And all religions are, right? Not that, Jesus' teachings and his true teachings and the system itself, like, I'm not saying quit Christianity. If that's what you're supposed to do, then that's what you're supposed to do. But recognize the bullshit is there, right? Like just everything else. Like I had to do this with my own thing, my own Sagemark system, which was pure and great and, completely spiritual as an organization. You know, people suck at it just like everything else, but the master of the system was impeccable, Master Chargy, the third master. And then he turned it over to this guy Dodgy, who turned it into a cult called Heartfulness. And as painful as it was for me, and, you know, as the information came in, I had to face it. Those of you who read, watched my Journey series, know how painful it was for me and all these things. You know, now most of that's been erased. I have to upload those videos again because they're very telling. But, you know, the whole thing was, just very painful. But it happened. Like, you know, as being a truth seeker and being someone, you know, if you're really spiritual, you know, God is truth and you have to face the truth. And there's a lot of problems with the Christian religion. There just is. And the behaviors that were exhibited. And I grew up under it. And those same behaviors Christians are now whining about because the liberals are doing the same thing to them. And even now they still want to go back and cancel the liberals because they're right and they're just, you know, they're moral authority. But you don't become a spiritual person that look at the demonic, you know, ungodly people and condemn them and say they have to change. And that's what Christianity and the right wing and the evangelicals and Trump are missing here, right? All you guys who are right wing people. You don't engage in the same behaviors as the depraved people and expect them to change because you're trying to force your worldview on them. Because Christianity was so sucky when I grew up in terms of being wrong about things and mistreating people and not including people and treating them like human beings, that a resistance has built up, which is now the liberal movement, the hippies, the liberal hippie movement that you see. And now these liberal hippies are, you know, after being suppressed and, you know, them rightfully talking about the illegal war in Vietnam that was killing people for no reason. It was a war against communism, the military-industrial complex. The hippies, you know, the poison and chemicals in our foods, the hippies actually had some valid points. But they were dismissed and they were ostracized the same way that the truth community and right-wing people, you know, Trumpers are being ostracized now. And so that behavior was behavior Christianity and right-wing Republicans exhibited and created a reaction. Whenever you use force, there is a force that, you know, an equal reaction that happens, right? There's always a counter movement. There's a rebound. You bounce a ball, the ball bounces back to you. And so when you force shit on people, there's going to be a rebellion against that force. And so force is never to be used. In the Sajmark meditation, the transmission's given is called the forceless force because it's God's divine love that has it's so subtle that there's no reaction to it. There's no pushing back against it, right? Because whenever force is used, your natural, you know, tendency is to resist the force, right? And then there's a backlash, and the backlash is what you're experiencing now. So everything the Christian, you know, the evangelicals and the Trumpers and the right wing are whining about, and people in the truth community are whining about, the liberals, is because you forced this on them, right? You didn't treat them like human beings, all these different groups, these so-called disenfranchised groups, and they are pissed off, and now that they have the power, they're wanting to put their boot on your neck, the way that you put your boot on their neck, right? And when you're a religious or spiritual person, when you're a godly person, you have to hold yourself accountable, right? One of the teachings Master Chargy said that, you know, the feminist movement wouldn't like is that women are the upholders of morality. That in a system that is a government, a culture that's immoral, women have to make sure, because women are naturally more in tune with God and nature. And, you know, they have a bigger sense of things. You know, men are brutes and, you know, often use force and, you know, don't think things through, and they're not as sensitive. And so men, you know, who just want to go off and smash everything and just take whatever and use brute force or whatever, you know, women going to war and women losing their sensitivity and losing their maternal instincts because motherhood has been demonized has caused an immoral reaction, and women going to an immoral side, you know, women dressing provocatively, women becoming, you know, more free sexually and things like this in terms of, you know, I mean, just the way that sexuality is, you know, not just the pornography, but all of it is so, been degraded, and it's not in the sanctity of marriage. It's not a monogamous relationship, built in, love of your partner, for your spouse for your, rest of your life, right? Where there's just, divorce and these things, all these things that, again, divorce. I mean, all of us who've been divorced are grateful for divorce, right? But in a, stable society, there's no need for it because people are good and people don't need to be, they can make their relationships work, and they sacrifice, and they give to each other, and they're good spouses, and there's not these kind of one-sided marriages and broken people. And all this happens because women have been corrupted. They get the women to go to the dark side, and that's what feminism is. And it's easy to destroy society and make it immoral because women aren't standing up for it, right? And that's their job. And spiritual people in general, their job is to uphold a spiritual connection and a spiritual consciousness. And they look at themselves first. They don't look at the worst people. That's the problem with the truth community. Truth community is looking at the so-called controllers or the elite, the worst of the worst, and expecting those people are going to change and trying to force them to change or trying to, reason with them to change or whatever it is. And they're not going to change because they're the worst people. Like if you're a spiritual person, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard, and you have to pull up the people around you. You have to dive deeper into your own, issues and your own hypocrisy and your own negativity. And you have to change and become a better person, and you pull society up with you when you do that. And we think about a person like Jesus or any of these saints or higher developed souls. Look at how many people they pulled up just by their success. What if there was half the population was, on the level of Jesus or beyond him, right? Because there's many levels beyond what he accomplished. And so if we had a society full of saints, which is what the Sizemore system was supposed to be about, but I mean, it's so degraded now that like it just took 4 masters before, there's this commercial, this owl, this this kid goes and says, how many licks does it get to the center of the Tootsie Pop? And the owl says, let me try it. And he goes 1, 2, and then bites it. And then 3, and then he bites it. And he goes, it's 3. And then he, bites into the center to get to the Tootsie Roll because he couldn't resist it, right? And that's like, the Sizemore system. They had 3 great masters, and usually there's just one. And then, boom, there's a corruption. Like that's how degraded humanity is. And so everybody who's complaining about this, if you want to pull up society, then you look at yourself and change for the better. You become a spiritual person. Then otherwise, just shut the fuck up, right? Because we're all in it together. And I'm not saying like I'm some great spiritual person because I'm not. I do what I do. I give it a old college try. I mean, I've become a better person. Like I guess I've done some of what I'm talking about here, but certainly not, anything to write home about. It's not like I'm, like a poster child for divinity, right? The divine process, but I've become better. Like I've pulled myself up, or I've, allowed myself to be pulled up by the divine process, right? By cultivating a relationship with the divinity within me. But again, everyone can do more. I certainly know that I can, and everyone else can, right? It isn't about you being better or you, telling other people what they have to do. It's about you rising up to a higher level. And if you're not doing that, then you have no reason to complain. I mean, even, just a little bit. And, and if you are doing that, you have no reason to complain. Because it's between you and God. Like whatever everyone else is doing is between them and God. But you have a bunch of people all pointing the fingers, right? The Master Charge used to say, whenever you're pointing your finger at somebody else, there's 3 fingers pointed back at you. Yeah, they suck. I document how they suck. Like that's what I do here. I mock them and talk about them. Trump sucks. They all suck. But their suckiness isn't, some get out of jail free card for the rest of us to suck. Well, they suck. I might as well suck, right? That's just, it's stupid. You have to be better. And so when you're a religious person, a spiritual person, you can't look at the people who are demonic and say it's their fault for being demonic because that's their tendencies, right? It's your inability to go up to a higher level and the lack of sincerity and authenticity in your religion that's caused the force that was used and the behaviors that were exhibited by the so-called religious people, the holier than thou people that suck and just are using God as a weapon so they can feel superior to other people. that's caused what's happening now. And so if you want to change that, you don't change the laws, you don't follow some false prophet in Trump, you don't, any of these things. You be better yourself. You find a way to elevate your level of being a human being and rise to a higher level through your connection to the divinity within you. And you pull your other people up around you. There's a thing called the 100th monkey syndrome where they watch these monkeys, and these monkeys were able to use some sort of a tool, right? It was like they use a tool to get sticks, like a stick they used to get ants and eat the ants or something like this. Or maybe they were washing something. It was something like that. They were washing food in the river. And so, they were doing it independently, but the majority of the monkeys weren't doing it. Maybe it was chimpanzees, I don't know. And after a certain time, all of them were able to do it because there was a level where the behavior was intuitively passed on to the whole species, right? And this happens all the time. One person breaks the 4-minute mile and then all these other people are doing it. Roger Bannister. People will go do something, and then after enough people do it, it'll be a collective behavior. Like look at texting and all the modern day stuff that's being done with technology, right? Not everyone texted or did these things. Not everyone was using this technology, but then after a while, everyone's using it. It just becomes normal and natural for people to do it because it becomes part of our collective consciousness. And so when a higher developed soul goes up to a higher level, it pulls everybody up. And if you have enough people doing 1/3 of the population, then everybody does it. Like everyone rises to that level. And so it's a critical mass. And so if enough people rise to a certain level of spiritual attainment, you'll see a lot of these negative behaviors fall off because everyone else will be up on that level, especially after there's massive population reduction and a lot of these, negative people are no longer, are part of it, right? Like their souls aren't on this planet. A lot of the demonic souls they won't be able to be here because there'll be less people. And so they won't be able to incarnate. I've talked about that before. And so the blame for the immorality is not the immoral demonic people. It never is. Because they're always there. It's when the other people are compromised, the good people are compromised, and they have gone to the dark side. They forget about God, and they allow the immorality to be a part of their lives. They get compromised by the movement, and then it just takes over. And so the good people have failed. It isn't that the bad people are the ones that, they're always going to be pushing for this. People always want everyone else to be where they are. And so there's always going to be some number, like 10% of the population, that's demonic and depraved, less hopefully in the future. But there's this, negativity that's there. And those people, their objectives and their goals are very simple. They want to bring down everybody else. But to do that, they have to bring down the really good people and the spiritual people, and they've done that. And the religion has been a big part of it. The Christian religion here and the religions around the world have helped lower the level of human consciousness because they've acted as a barrier between you and God, and you're no longer connected to God because the religion is the middleman between you and God, and then all this other stuff seeps in. And so anybody talking about, any of these Christians talking about, it's God's will, you're not doing God's will. Jesus isn't happy with you. Like, you're living a lie, right? You're not doing what Jesus wanted you to do. The religion isn't. They've hijacked his teachings. He's not happy with you. Neither is God, right? And so you have to, see that for what it is and then rise up and seek the truth in every aspect. Okay, I'm just going to wrap this video up here. I saw this meme on Facebook. MaxiPad Eargate, hashtag Eargate, which is, we have Ketchupgate and Bandaidgate, which is a little bit better. MaxiPad covered ears. Again, MaxiPad, this is something where, my wife, I think, said that to me, or maybe one of the people, a commenter, called it a MaxiPad. I keep on calling it a tampon, then remember it's a MaxiPad. MaxiPad covered ear, you're telling me doctors can't do better than this? I am a nurse also, and when I saw this bandage, I laughed out loud, and I said that this is a prop, not surprisingly. And so, it's just obvious, right? I mean, it's goofy. Like, we now know he had no stitches, no ear damage. He's still parading it around and talking about it and lying to his people who are wearing the T-shirt of his, his WWE pose and all these things. And maybe even them, they're a little suspicious of it. They just are into it, just like WWE. And they're going along with his divisive rhetoric and all these things, And so just to wrap this thing up, if you're going to be a divine person, if you're going to be a guru, if you're going to be, put yourself in there as a spiritual person and bring about God and bring up God and, that you're somehow the chosen one, all these types of things. If you're going to do that, you better be that, right? Like, this is not something for fakers and flim-flam man and these things, because people's belief in God, and a lot of them are newborn, they're new souls. They're first timers here as a human being. They don't have the ability for critical thinking skills, right? They have their faith, but they're not really able to connect to God, internally. They don't have the ability for abstract thought, these types of things, right? And so these people are simple people that have a simple faith, and they're looking for something in somebody, and they're there's a craving inside of them to connect to God. But right now they don't have the capacity yet to connect to God, in terms of spirituality internally. And so they look through it through a religion, it's the best that they can do in whatever religion, and they want community, and they're just understanding God, like they're children, like in a way, adult children who are just getting the basic understanding of God. And somebody like this can completely screw them out of that, can fuck them over and affect their faith in future lives and all these things, right? And so you don't mess around with this kind of stuff. Like, it's one thing to be a scammer, flip-flam man, and play on people's greed, play on people's, their desire for celebrity and some of these other things. But to attribute your bullshit as divine, right? And puts this kind of imagery and symbology out there of the blood and the all this stuff, and being the chosen one, and that this is your God's chosen, all these things. Same thing they did with the Cubies. When he didn't even know who the Cubies were, and once he found out, he started to, tell them and hint to them that he was the chosen one to go out and get rid of the deep state, right? And so, like, it's not something to play around with. Like, puts him on a different level of scumbag, right? It's one thing to, be like a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and, take the people who are, already lost and atheistic, and, they're liberal, and they, and play to their, then again, they don't believe what their people believe either. But, placate them and, tell them what they want to hear, but to mess around with people's internal, desired, eternal need to connect to God and all these things that, people have spiritually. You just don't do that, right? And he's doing that. Like, he's playing these people, and, it's just so obvious. And they're just so, they just don't have the ability. They're so desperate. They don't have the ability to even take a look at what's going on. And the other thing, and just to wrap this up, but, now Israel's going to have some, like, really tough strike against the Palestinian people that they're calling against Hamas. And it came right after Kamala criticized Netanyahu while he was here, and he met with Biden, and he clearly isn't going to give Biden a deal. He wants Trump, right? And he knows that, he can influence this election, and that's what they did. He went over to Trump's house, and that was a big deal, and, they're having this, this moment together, and he's meeting with Kamala Harris, and he's meeting with Joe Biden, but he's pissed at them for not giving him a blank check. And Trump will give him that, because as long as they kiss Trump's ass, Trump will give him anything that he wants. Trump just wants to be loved and, thought of as some wonderful person. And so if he criticized Trump, then, he's done. I mean, Trump was pissed at him just because he accepted Joe Biden as the president, which he had to do. And Trump, he criticized this guy, but now they're hugging and, all these things. And this is, there's a couple of things that there are pathways to bringing down America that Trump is going to push. Of course, the Ukraine for, the moral degradation in the Ukraine and things like this for the Democrats. But for Trump, it's Israel and the banks and, the Wall Street, and giving all these people a blank check and deregulating everything and getting rid of these agencies that are there for checks and balances and pushing through all these things, and then having the ability to do anything he wants as president and not face any sort of criminal prosecution and all these people, the criminal element. And so that's where Trump will, destroy America. And so it's happening either way. I mean, there's no pathway that America won't end up. I mean, it's already in the process of collapsing anyway, right? But this is, him posing as a fake guru and all these things that he's doing. And then, the Israeli support. And, this is like end of time stuff. But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.